Hi everyone, welcome to Chapter 9 on communication in the workplace. So today we're going to talk about the McShane's textbook on explain the value of communication, the use of different communication channels in the organization, the value of each of these channels, and some of the barriers that we have when we try to communicate. And lastly, we're going to also talk about how to improve your ability to communicate and the relevance of organizational grapevines as well. So McShane starts off this chapter with really talking about the importance of communication. So you'll see this in the Prezi slides. It talks about the model of communication, the influences on coding and decoding in organizations, and how similar code books actually help employees communicate better. Employees who have encoding proficiency and also understand each of the communication channels and ability to use them appropriately, and shared mental models of the communication context really help improve communication in the organization. So McShane also talks a little bit about in terms of communication channels and about the problems with email in the workplace. You know, I see this problem happening all the time today, is that we've gotten too used to email and the impersonality that comes along with it. And I really want to discuss that for a few minutes of how important that is in terms of a concept. We'll talk more about it during the class lecture, but I really want to make sure that you understand that what I see happening today is that there's a familiarity and a comfort, so to speak, by being slightly removed from actually talking to someone. Firing off an email, in some cases, I remember a manager that would always write like a 10-page long email and wondering why no one would actually read their email. And they would say to me that they loved sending these long emails because it was so complex that they wanted to write everything down so they didn't miss anything. But I said, if you expect that, and how is the challenge would be is if no one's reading it, did you actually even communicate, right? I remember stories from managers telling me that they use email as a way of making sure that the other person received the message. I said, well, if the message was complex and you just wanted to make sure that was clear, why don't you just talk to them face to face and then send an email following up, clearly outlining what you expected them to do afterwards. And sometimes we use these email chains as a way of documenting our arguments and protecting our asses sometimes, and sometimes that can backfire because no one will actually read those emails because they end up being too long and people can clearly see behind the intention of those emails. Right, so I always suggest to people, I always follow two rules. The first rule is always to pick up the phone and call someone. And ideally walk down the hall to go see them face to face. And secondly, if the first rule doesn't work, then go back and try rule number one more time, is rule number 2. And so the point of all of this is face-to-face communication, and telephone makes much more sense when you're trying to deal with ambiguous, complex information. And email is really just a poor medium for trying to communicate this ambiguous, complex information. And we seem to be doing that more and more today for some reason because we have a comfort with it. Emails also have a problem with reducing politeness and respect in the workplace. It contributes to information overload. How many can see like having 100 emails in their inbox every single day? One of the things that I think is also important with all of this is looking at one thing that McShane does do really well is talking about the media hierarchy between low, medium, low context messages like financial statements as an example, and how face-to-face communication, because of the additional body language elements, actually helps communicate really complex and novel issues. And so pay attention to that media hierarchy when you're looking through the McShane textbook. I think it does a wonderful job of articulating that, and we'll debrief a little bit more in class about that as well. I think one thing that the media hierarchy diagram that McShane talks about is one of the things that I wanted to touch on is the importance of body language. They say that between 70% to 80% of what you communicate comes through your body language. In this day of virtual workplaces where everyone's working from home, I see this all the time with students that are taking the class, but also the workplace, where when people are on camera, they forget that they're on camera and they forget to manage their body language. People laying back on their bed and taking a meeting, for example. What does that really say when you're working with each other on a message? Amy Cuddy does this fantastic presentation. She did this groundbreaking research in 2012. I'll put the YouTube video link in the message below, and it's also in the Prezi slides for you. And this message went viral between 2015 to 2018, I think, if memory serves me correct. It talks a lot about how, and presenting an argument that improving your posture is key to building your confidence. However, for alumni taking this class, I recently changed that conversation in the classroom to talk about how this was now debunked. But now recently there's some counter arguments that have just come out. So I'm going to yo-yo back to my original presentation earlier and say that new evidence actually shows that Amy was right all along around how impactful body posture is in building your confidence and also communicating better, helping you improve your communication as well. In Amy's presentation, she talks a lot about how body language shapes who you are and the impact of power poses to help build your confidence. And so I like the fact that Amy's been successfully been able to refute the criticism that was placed on her roughly around 2018, I think that was. And so I think it's a good presentation to go back and look at as well. I think it's also one thing that's really important to note in this McShane textbook is looking at the research and identifying, choosing the best channel. What we find today in the workplace, what's happening is that a lot of employees and a lot of managers default to a favorite channel, like email, for example, to communicate on a regular basis. And in reality is that as managers, and we have to basically train our employees to have the capability and the competency from choosing different medias according to the necessary thing that they're trying to communicate. You know, face-to-face, telephone, instant messaging, email, memos, reports. They all have a place in an organization, and we have to learn how to adapt and use the right tool for the job. We also know that today in the workplace that there's a lot of barriers when it comes to communication and noise, information overload being one of them. But we also see that one of the challenges that we see in the workplace that we've talked about in this class before is cross-cultural issues, how different cultures communicate, and also how different genders communicate within the workplace too. And we have to be really aware and understand these different expectations as well. We also see that there's significant nonverbal differences across cultures as well. So I'll get into that during the class lecture as well, and during the class. And I'll share some of the research that's around in terms of how different cultures communicate in the workplace. So I thought I would cover off some additional books. So there's some that I wanted to mention is Radical Candor by Kim Scott, which I've mentioned before in other chapters, and she talks a lot about having care and being candid with your employees, and so critical on that. Ikejiro Nanaka is also an author that I really enjoy reading. It's a little bit scientific in its background, but what Ikejiro talks a lot about is how do you create that family room that we all remember in our childhood, where as a family we would always get together and there'd be a lot of dialogue. And so he talks about how do you create that family room setting in an organization where employees often meet informally to discuss projects and plans, debrief, learn, and share with each other, and how do you create that socialization process in an organization. So I really enjoyed this book as well. Another one that I really want to talk about was Talk Incorporated by Boris Groysberg and Michael Slind. They talk about this book. The reason why I like this book is that it taught me how to become a better manager in terms of improving my conversational intimacy, connecting with people, understanding that communicating more regularly was key with my employees, and with better interactivity, so there was more of a two-way dialogue. And it's really a good structure in terms of how to improve your organizational communication style within the workplace as a manager. And the last one I really wanted to just mention was really this book here, which is Paul Smith's book, Lead with the Story. Talks about 21 business stories and also some templates in here which are great, which talks about how do you build your toolkit in how to tell stories within the workplace everyone loves a good story. Everyone remembers stories better. So Paul really talks about how do you improve your ability to talk about a vision, organizational expectation that you need your team to follow through with, and develop that through a storytelling method so that it allows people to remember these organizational expectations that you have of them. And so these are some of my favorite books that I've had in my library that I've referenced once in a while when I want to improve my communication style. So anyways, hope you enjoyed that, and I'll talk to you guys during the next class. See you guys soon. Bye.